The Federal and Francis Xavier Engineering College jointly present the Nellai Marathon 2024. This event is powered by Little Flower Public School and NIMS Hospital, Tirunelveli. Run for Health on Sunday, December 29. Entry is free and all are welcome.
What I'm trying to do is give a little bit of solidity to that emotion of facing mortality. That human beings should not at all feel constrained by or be limited by anything. And in our ravaged world, where so much is being destroyed all the time, how do we restore beauty or dignity to life? I think that is an important thing for an artist to do.
Hello and welcome to Culture Vibes, the Federal's special program in which we talk to writers and artists about their work. We are joined by a celebrated writer who is as comfortable with a pen as he is with a paintbrush. Someone who blends words and images into profound reflections on the state of our world and the world he sees around. A master of storytelling as well as observation, Amitava Kumar is professor of English at Vassar College in New York, in upstate New York. His work spans continents, cultures, and of course, mediums. From his powerful explorations of the personal and political to his journals filled with sketches and musings, he brings us a rare combination of intellectual depth and artistic flair. Welcome to the show, Amitava. Thank you so much for making time for me.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, of course, you have you have written novels, you have written nonfiction, but today we'll be talking about the latest three books and a kind of a trilogy of these three hybrid books, which started with the Blue Book 2 years ago. Last year you had the Yellow Book, and this year I think your latest book, that is, I'm just showing it to the readers, the Green Book, an Observer's Notebook. Let us begin with State of the Bat with this trilogy. It of course progresses from the introspective kind of melancholy of the Blue Book to that was of course a book that the pandemic that you wrote during based on your experiences with the pandemic, and then this in the Yellow Book, this is all about this renewal and grace, and finally we arrive at the third book in the series, and that is all about hope and resilience and renewal in a way, and of course the climate. So do you sort of see all these three books as part of a continuum? Did you sort of consciously imagine this arc, or this is Colors Lead the kind of narrative evolution that has happened throughout these three books?
No, it happened rather accidentally almost. Mm-hmm. When I started, I thought I would do the Blue Book because I was painting. I had started doing these paintings during the pandemic. And then once it was over, I continued to do the work. I had taken my students to London for a semester. And there, because I was drawing the buildings I was seeing, what I could see outside my window, and taking walks on the heath in London. My course was called Walking Diaries.
Yes.
When doing that, I thought, well, if the Blue Book had been a writer's notebook, let me now make this a traveler's diary, And then I had gotten into the flow of it, It was like, how shall I say, a low-grade addiction. I thought, ki bhaiya, gaadi chali hai to chalte rahe. And so as you know, if you mix blue and yellow, you get the color green. So yeah. I started thinking of green. And I hope you will agree with me. With every passing year, the way the climate change, the way global warming is affecting our lives is becoming so much more oppressive, so much more real, that I just thought that a book, an artistic book, that in some ways reflected on both the beauty of the planet and the ravages on it, would be necessary. So that's how I came to it.
Right. And these all three, in fact, have been beautifully produced by HarperCollins India. These are, of course, a delight for anybody who is interested in all these things that we have spoken about. And this brings me to another question, Amitava, that is mostly about this Green Book and how it sort of sprang from, you being at the Cullman Center and diving into these archives of writers, and these are writers who also at some point in their career also wrote, took to images to sort of, so writers like Bronte sisters, for instance, and Henry David Thoreau, you have Vladimir Nabokov, Jack Kerouac, Annie Proulx, and others. So I wanted to ask you if from their mixed sort of genre creations in a way, how did their discoveries sort of shape your own approach in this particular book of text and images?
Yes. It started, you're quite right to note that that was some work I did at the Cullman Center because I had a fellowship which freed me from teaching here at Vassar College. But it started even before that because my whole journey in this adventure in art actually started with the writer Michael Ondaatje giving me a book of John Berger's. I began thinking of how Berger would draw a flower or a bicycle or a person, and he would rub his spit on it, and it would be very material and yet it would be very alive, the image. And I thought, well, I could do that too, And so that's how it was, that writer's lesson that really took hold in my brain. And then during that London stay, I started looking at the notebooks of these writers, these other writers who were not artists, but Virginia Woolf or John Berger himself or Shiva Naipaul. And since photography was not allowed at the British Library, I just thought, I have got right here next to me this iPad, and I just thought, okay, I'll start doing the drawings there, So that, and then like I could show it to you. These are just drawings, It is little drawings. And so from there, what happened was I began then thinking, coming to the Cullman Center, that maybe I could look at these drawings that these other, in this other archive, what these writers had drawn. Nabokov's sketches or paintings of butterflies are just stunning. They are so beautiful, so meticulous, so colorful, graphic, beautifully labeled. It's a work of genius, and I was very much inspired by these things, including Annie Proulx's landscapes, both for the way she saw these landscapes and transferred them onto paper, but also here and there little eccentric touches. In one, for example, the snow had been painted by using the foam from her coffee cup, from her cappuccino, and I thought that is nice, inventive. So yes, so those were the ways I was touched by the art.
Okay, the titles themselves, I think, from the Blue Book, that is subtitles, A Writer's Journal, and then we come to the Yellow Book, which is subtitled A Traveler's Diary, and then the final book, that is the Green Book, is an observer's notebook. So all these elements, as a writer, as a traveler, and an observer, and if one reads these three books, with a little care, one would notice that actually these are the different aspects that you bring to your notes, and these notes are steeped in your own sort of appreciation of the works of other writers, of course, but also you being attuned and alive to that particular moment that you are in. And it is fascinating how you sort of draw these various parallels across languages, cultures. There are writers like Premchand, for instance, whose home you visit. And but let me begin with, of course, the first section that is called Trees, and you have other sections like called the Green Album, or The Nature of War, All Rules of Writing. So this first section, Trees, in which you talk about many writers, but let me start with Janet Malcolm's Burdock you mentioned, and you reveal your own appreciation for this overlooked beauty in imperfection and decay. And I was wondering how you describe, you have a very beautiful phrase to describe this, and you call it small ravaged landscapes, and you write that they actually hide the mystery of life and death. And I just wanted to ask you, how does this influence your own sort of broader creative process
Right.
across genres, and particularly when observing and documenting these very, very fleeting moments?
My approach is that of a writer. And I think if you're a writer, what you hold on very close to your heart is the practice of observation.
Yeah.
What James Wood calls serious noticing. Even when I was much younger, I'm talking about 30, 40 years ago, in Delhi, studying at the university, if I would enter a room, I would try to play a game with myself. I would ask myself, if I shut my eyes and went out, how many things could I record? How many things would I remember that I had seen? I was just training myself because I had somehow, मैं उस समय की बात कर रहा हूँ when I must have been, I don't know, 21 or 22, even earlier. I would think that if I am noticing everything, then maybe I will have something to write. It will be as if you're building material. Now I think it is the less remarked thing that I must notice. It is the more surprising detail that I must observe. And in this case, the example that you rightly chose of Janet Malcolm's art, I loved it that she had taken something that is not regarded as a beautiful thing, a weed, which name is burdock here.
Yeah.
And that she had painted not just a green leafy leaf, a leaf that would be a weed that would be considered beautiful or life, but also the diseased and the tattered ones.
Yes.
And I thought attentiveness is what gives beauty and elegance and form. And in our ravaged world, where so much is being destroyed all the time, how do we restore beauty or dignity to life? I think that is an important thing for an artist to do. Nay?
And as a writer, as an artist, I think these books also seen you in a way turning to nature to do precisely that. And you mentioned Joyce Kilmer's lines, and it's a beautiful line that I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree, and that actually is something that seems like an urgent call to center trees and greenery in our imaginations. That's very essential for the very survival of our planet. So, do you believe that literature and art, with sort of emotional power and heft, are better positioned than science, perhaps, to inspire action on climate change, and also how writers contribute to sort of reshaping our relationship with nature in ways that perhaps science cannot?
I do think that literature has a role to play. I mentioned I'm seeing, because of the chapter you mentioned, I'm looking, there's mention there of Richard Powers' book, The Overstory.
Yeah.
So yeah, Nawad, have you read that book by any chance? Have you read
Yes.
The Overstory? Yeah.
Yes.
You learn about trees. I have to say, when I read that novel, I began to think of the trees I saw, their names and their lives in a different way. It is from that book that I read that trees talk to each other, or that they travel, that they exchange news of a disease arriving with each other, and they build their that idea of a communal life. We're a community. So I thought, now on that question, I must say that Richard Powers must have learned that from science. So I'm not trying to rule out science, but I am saying that I gained my own affective and rich relationship with trees because of that book. And so, in other words, I was inspired by literature. I certainly am an example of, or evidence of, the power of literature to move someone. And that is why I started paying attention to trees in a different way. And when I heard my wife keep saying, once, twice, more than several times, that, oh, this is my favorite tree. It is at the back of where I'm sitting. I thought I'll start painting it. I have done numerous paintings of this tree. It's just like, let me try to please my wife on one hand, but it's also about stating my affection for what I see in the bend of the branches, in the leaves that come up, in the leaves that fall, in the flowers that appear every alternate year, by the way. It doesn't appear every year. This is another thing I learned. It is because I was observing that I learned this thing. So that is another aspect of it.
Right. And it is also very fascinating how you draw on these notes of the writers, and also to interpret the text that perhaps could not make to the final version of the pieces, for instance. And I'm talking here specifically of Nabokov and his observation about the importance of writing to retain the particularity of moments. And you write how, in fact, he wrote, that how these impressions blur without the act of recording them. If you don't record them, they actually tend to vanish in the thin air. How do you sort of navigate this balance between sort of capturing life in its immediacy, because you're in the moment, you're living the moment, you want to capture it through words, images. So the immediacy of living fully in the moment, and also this urgency to capture it.
Yeah, I think there is that wonderful phrase about journalism being the first draft of history. And my friend Teju Cole wrote that actually keeping a journal is in that way the first rough draft of literature. And I agree with that. I think the immediacy is gained from always thinking that the moment I'm experiencing, a part of that is also the experience of writing it down or drawing it on the page. So for me, there is no division. But I was interested in those notebooks, boss, because I'm interested in the process of writing. It's not just the product that appears on the bookshelf, but the process. How did something that was observed become later this book that I'm now holding in the hand? And what are the changes that have been undergone in the time in between? So I'm very interested. This writer took down a note on this day, and 18 months later, it entered this chapter in this particular way. And this is what she changed, or this is what she added to it, or this was the conundrum she was facing. So मुझे तो बड़ा fascinating लगता है वो. That's how someone has done, and that's how I can take note of it and learn from it.
This book was also, in a way, your way to process grief. And last year you lost your father, and
yes,
there are bits about your, for instance, you going to Manikarnika Ghat in Varanasi, and recording those moments of both as a son and also as an observer, and this tension between this personal grief, of course, but also this urge to sort of document that what you experience in that moment with a sense of journalistic detachment, you write. I wanted to understand how, and this year also, I think you began with a novel, My Beloved Time, and My Beloved Life. Sorry, and I wanted to understand if that how did this book sort of help you process that grief, and even in that moment, that concern and regard for instance, climate change, and you talk about that bit about the woods, that and electric crematorium, for instance.
Yeah, what happens is that when I went for my father's cremation, I was caught up in the ritual. I was just following what the priest was saying, and I did not think I had the space or the time to really experience what I was feeling. And so I thought, I'll go back. And so a few months later, I went back And then I thought, but why did my father want to be cremated at Manikarnika? So, what is the importance of the Ganga? Maybe I should journey down the Ganga from where the two rivers join and become the Ganga, and then I'll go down. And the way this experience helped me was simply that all along that travel, in some ways, I was accompanying my father in my mind about what had happened. So it was just slowing it down. And that, I think, is a meditative practice. It is also what one is doing when one writes or draws. You're slowing it down, you're slowing time. So I think that is the answer, that it allowed me just to experience and slow things down and just immerse myself in the emotion. And yet, I wanted to make sense of the social questions or political questions surrounding me. So I was alert, for example, in Uttarakhand, of how polarized the society has become, how the poison of communalism and religious difference has been spread there. By the time I came to Banaras, I was more conscious of the way the river is being polluted. And by the time I ended up in the Sundarbans, I was listening to the stories people were telling me about the rising waters, the increasing salinity, how many millions of people will be displaced when the seawater rises. And I thought I should jot it all down, and in as efficient and quick a way and engaging maybe a way and instructive a way as possible, I should make some drawings but also give an account of ecological change. Do you think it worked, or did you?
It does. They are immensely moving, and they're also, of course, make you think about your own tiny role, perhaps, in making
Yes.
this better. And as you said, it is actually very, very instructive. So these are, of course, moments of when we recognize that in these moments of personal crisis, also we have to somewhere uh, take into account the future of our planet, and what we should do to sort of save it. And this brings me to another question about planting and preserving memories, and the act of memory, act of preserving memory. Do you see these as two strands running throughout in this series?
Yes, because in the Blue Book, now that I think of it, I had started painting on the obituaries printed by the New York Times, because I wanted to highlight in some ways death, or who was dying. Then I would leave the names and bare, and then around them I would paint flowers or whatever. And in the Yellow Book, I actually record my father's death because I'm in the ICU at Patna, and I have a little section there. And in this one, I go again on that journey, but I'm also talking about some of the other people. For example, I was on New Year's Day this year.
Yeah.
I was in the car and listening to a podcast by Willie Dalrymple along with his partner on the Empire podcast. And there was a quote of T.E. Lawrence where he describes how he's thinking of a leaf falling in autumn, and how he thinks of his life. This was just before his death. And I thought, if I record those moments and also try to make art out of it, what I'm trying to do is give a little bit of solidity to that emotion of facing mortality, And that, certainly now that I'm over 60 and having faced recently the death of my own father, I cannot but think that I am next in line. You know what I'm saying? So it's like how to think about life and how to think about other people who have passed before you, and how also at the same time to recognize that there are generations behind you that are already shaping themselves to be the new adults. And it is they, if you think about the earth, it is they who will save it from destruction. It is amazing to see, boss, the activism of the young.
Yeah.
Greta Thunberg is a young girl who started, who as a young girl started her agitation against global warming and spread a certain awareness,
Absolutely.
So yes.
These two mediums, do you see the visual and of course the words? They do you see these complementing each other in the book, or did you, while writing this book and while painting for these three books, have moments where you felt that certain emotions or experiences were better expressed through visually than in words, or vice versa?
That's a difficult question. I'm trying to think. I really believe that human beings should not at all feel constrained by or be limited by anything. The idea of liberation should be such that whatever catches your mood, you should be able to do it. I mean, I have no musical talent, but I wish I was a musician. Why? That if I saw clouds, Meg Malhar Sale hum bhi gaate, what I mean is I would have also liked, to be able to express myself beautifully in music. But I think in India, only Bengalis have that kind of talent to be able to, mazak kar raha hu, to be able to, if they want, they can sing, they can make a film in the manner of Satyajit Ray, they can write, they can draw in the manner of Nandalal Bose. But, I teach here at a liberal arts college. And if you think of what someone like Rabindranath Tagore was trying to do at Shantiniketan, was to endow all the students with that gift of being able to express yourself in any way you wanted. You would start the day with singing, you would do some drawing, you would participate, with villagers in making clay images. This idea where we are not professionalized into disciplines and into expertise, should be encouraged in our society and every society.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I don't really think that I'm a great, I'm not here to boast that I'm a great artist, or for that matter, a great writer. It is just that I'm standing at the threshold of my house and saying, come in, I'm going to write and to paint, and you should do the same. Do it in your journal, do it in your daily practice. We should,
Right.
we should liberate our talents from all kinds of inhibitions.
That's beautifully said, really. And while talking about this dialogue between image and text, one is also tempted to think about, the ways that you. There's another way that you do in this book, and that is through the portraits of people, and you have the quotes. So, people, for instance, like Mahant Vishambar Mishra, who you met on your journeys in India, I think. During your travels.
Right.
Yeah. Then there is, of course, the Rajkumar Jha and other people you have captured, and So this integration of text and and a very seamless integration of text and images. Do you fancy telling a story? Maybe perhaps your next book, which will be totally told through images, perhaps like a novel, perhaps through images.
Yes, boss. I was actually, you've put your finger on something. I was thinking that, can there be a non-fiction book where, we should tell your viewers that the example you're talking about is where I have taken a photograph.
Yeah.
And then beneath the photograph, because I was using an iPad, I've asked people to write down their thoughts, whatever they have to say. And so here is our friend Raj Kamal from the Indian Express.
Yeah.
I took his picture, and then I uploaded his picture on this iPad, and I gave him this pen, and I said, write down about this day, about the rain that is falling. And he wrote about the wind, and he says, the wind tries to blow the hat away. I wish to keep it on. Amitava, as always, wants to catch what happens in between. fleeting, falling. July 9, 2023. It rained 150 plus millimeters in the city today. So, yes, I mean, you have I actually have thought interestingly about what you said. I thought if I keep taking portraits and then have people write their thoughts, I could make a little book out of it, just so that it is not me who is giving my words, letting my subject speak for themselves, while I play the role of the artist and curator. Artist in the sense that I take the picture and then I curate, the selection of folks who do it. So that is, yes.
Yeah, this idea of seeing, as being, as you write, it's something that, of course, is philosophical, it's urgent, but I was wondering if these moments of observing and or looking at having a particular way of seeing at things, or the way things are happening around you, does that also sort of change you as a writer, and change in some sense your understanding of yourself, or the understanding of the world around you? Perhaps inevitable that it will change the understanding of the world around you.
Well, let's think of things that are happening around us. Does it change me? If I experience the enormity of heat on a particular day, then I feel physically uncomfortable, right? So that is one kind of change we are talking about. Or if I am visiting Delhi and breathe in the particulate matter with the air, I feel the discomfort or the rawness. But for me, the real change is what is changing in us psychologically, psychically. So there is a chapter here called Many Words for Heat, Many Words for Hate, where I'm really talking about, on one hand, the environment, what is the politics of environment? How is the environment changing? But I'm also talking about the environment of politics. How has politics affected and polarized our society? How has hate been spread? So that is one thing. So that is one change I'm talking about, where I feel that I'm caught in a historical current to which I must respond, and respond in a way that is forceful or critical. Another thing that has been happening, which has been on my mind very much over the past year, is the war in Gaza, and and it changes me in the sense that it makes me feel powerless. My son is my son is 15 years old. He's an activist. He is organized in this community on the question of Palestine. I, as an artist or a writer, think, oh, my job is to write, but I'm changed by all of that, what is happening, because I think I'm confronted by the question, what can I write? What can one do? I think what is happening in the world is rendering us rather helpless, and there must be a stronger response, but I don't know what.
How do you sort of look, for instance, for hope in these?
Yes. Well, I do look at writers. In fact, a few days ago, I wrote a little piece about this Palestinian poet called Mossab Abu Toha. But also in this book, by the time I come to the ending of the book, when I talk about a friend of mine who has lost her child, I might have quoted her because she wrote on Instagram. Oh, yes, I did quote her.
Yeah,
She wrote on Instagram, one must believe life is extraordinary.
Yeah.
And another of her phrases, which I might not have mentioned here, but what she often uses is, in nature, things merely grow. That's a great belief. There's a great belief that even amidst the misery, the flower will still bloom. And if you're connected to nature in that way, I think there is a great hope, because despite everything, the grass will still grow and it will be green. So that, I think, is a wonderful thing, and I certainly am inspired. I'm looking at what I had written of my friend. I'm very much inspired by her courage and by her attitude. And she is a wonderful gardener, and she posts pictures all the time on her account of the flowers in her garden. And I cherish that very much. I mean, if she can do it,
Yeah.
I mean, why shouldn't I?
And you write how in one of her posts, in fact, she mentions this haiku by Kobayashi Issa, that this world of do is a world of do, and yet, and yet. And then you go on to describe another of his haiku, and there's such a moving, paragraph, and sort of meditation, of course, on grief, and also something that gives you hope. And you end it with another haiku that reads, "The snow is melting and the village is flooded with children."
I also thought that because I had dedicated the book to my children and the children of my friends, that I should note. And I was making an offering to her, she who had lost her child. I was offering another of haikus of Isa, so that she would see suddenly in these 3 lines the sudden arrival of children, and I'm sure that would be a good sight also for her, a solace. I know you have a child too, so
Yes. So from Kilmer to Isa, I think there's poetry, and in this series of books, we have poetry, we have fiction, we have non-fiction, we have literature, we have music, we have art. There's so much, Amitava, to take home from these books. And as a reader, I was deeply enriched.
You are a very generous reader. Thank you so much, though. Yes, I appreciate your words.
So on that note of positivity, and on the need for us to turn to art and poetry and creativity and writing and images and sketches and paintings, we would end this conversation. It is always a delight, Amitava, to talk to you, and I would look forward. I think we met in Delhi 2 years ago, and in these past 3 years, you have written 3 books, and I'm sure you are at it. Even when things are going haywire in the world, as a writer, as somebody who observes things very closely and also records them in prose that is both moving, and they leaps at you with their kind of sensibility that is sort of very distinct, in a sense that you're a writer who straddles different worlds and different cultures. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The Federal and Francis Xavier Engineering College jointly present the LA Marathon 2024. This event is powered by Little Flower Public School and NIMS Hospital, Tirunelveli. Run for Health on Sunday, December 29. Entry is free and all are welcome.